and exciting story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was just the nanny until the billionaire ordered her to pretend to be his wife, but one night of pretending turned into a forbidden passion. Now she's pregnant and carrying a secret that could destroy everything. Watch this story to the end, you'll be surprised by it. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment, we post videos like this every day. Continuing. The cold wind of Aspen, Colorado cut through the skin, like a sharp blade, and Emily Parker pulled her coat tighter against her body as she watched Lily play in the mansion's garden. The 3-year-old girl ran among the rose bushes, her golden hair flying in the wind, laughing at something only she understood. It was a rare sound in that house. Laughter. Emily had grown accustomed to the heavy silence that hung over every room, every hallway, every corner of that immense property. She had been working as the Morgan family's nanny for 8 months, and during all that time, Lily's father had appeared only 3 times. Quick, formal visits, as if he were fulfilling a bureaucratic obligation. Nathan Morgan was a name that echoed through the country's economic news, always associated with million-dollar deals, decisions that affected thousands of jobs, financial market movements that made stocks rise or plummet. But to Lily, he was just a framed photograph on the bedside table, a ghost she called Daddy, but who was rarely present to respond. Emily knew well the feeling of abandonment. At 32, she carried invisible scars from a childhood fragmented between orphanages and temporary homes. People who promised affection and disappeared in the middle of the night. Families who returned her like a defective product when they discovered that a child wasn't just smiles and hugs, but also night. Fears, uncomfortable questions, and the constant need for attention. She learned early that loving was dangerous, that getting attached was a luxury she couldn't afford. That's why when she accepted the job of caring for Lily, she promised herself she would maintain emotional distance. It was just a job, a source of stable income after years of jumping from one occupation to another. Saleswoman, waitress, cleaner, receptionist, anything that paid the bills and didn't require lasting bonds. But Lily destroyed all her defenses in a matter of weeks. The girl was a hurricane of energy and affection, clingy as molasses, smart as a miniature adult. She had the habit of climbing into Emily's lap during storms, whispering that she didn't want to be alone. She asked impossible questions about why Daddy was always traveling, why Mummy had gone to heaven, why the other house staff spoke quietly when they thought she wasn't listening. Emily tried to answer with the honesty a child deserved, but without exposing wounds that were still open. The Morgan mansion was a monument to isolation. Built on a hilltop in Aspen, surrounded by native forest and a high wall that kept the world outside, the property seemed more like a refuge than a home. The rooms were enormous, decorated with expensive furniture that no one dared to use. There was a music room with a grand piano that was never played, a library with thousands of books that remained closed, a ballroom that received no visitors. It was as if the entire house was waiting for something that never arrived. The only permanent inhabitants were Emily, Lily, Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for 15 years, and 3 staff members who took care of maintenance and security. All of them spoke of Nathan Morgan with a mixture of respect and caution, as if mentioning an unpredictable force of nature. Emily had heard the whispered conversations in the kitchen, the comments about the scandal that had exploded in recent months. Nathan's name was involved in a federal investigation into financial data manipulation at the company he commanded, Morgan Holdings. Accusations of corruption, tax evasion, money laundering, the kind of crisis that destroyed reputations and sent executives to prison. But what really fueled the gossip was the mystery surrounding the death of Isabella Morgan, Nathan's wife and Lily's mother. Isabella had died 2 years ago from a fall from the balcony of the master bedroom. The official report indicated suicide, but there were details that didn't fit. Contradictory witnesses, questionable evidence, a medical history that didn't suggest suicidal tendencies. The investigation had been quickly archived, but speculation continued to circulate in gossip magazines and internet sites. Some insinuated that Nathan had discovered his wife's extramarital affair. Others suggested that she had threatened to expose her husband's illicit business dealings, There were even those who speculated about the possibility of murder. Emily tried not to listen to these conversations, but it was impossible to ignore them completely, especially when Lily woke up in the middle of the night, crying because of nightmares about her mother. The girl had fragmented memories of Isabella, flashes of a blonde, perfumed woman who put her to sleep, singing lullabies, but she also carried the confusion of having lost her mother at an age when she didn't understand the finality of death. That May afternoon, as she watched Lily play, Emily felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. There was something different in the air, a tension she couldn't identify. The security guards were more alert than usual, communicating by radio more frequently. Mrs. Reynolds had spent the entire morning obsessively cleaning the main floor, as if preparing for an inspection. When the sound of a helicopter cut through the silence of the afternoon, Emily knew something was about to change. The helicopter landed on the property's helipad, raising a cloud of dry leaves and dust. Emily picked Lily up in her arms, moving away from the window by instinct. The girl, however, was ecstatic about the aircraft, clapping and shouting with excitement. It had been months since she had asked when Daddy would return, and Emily always responded evasively because she genuinely didn't know. The house door opened forcefully, and heavy footsteps echoed through the entrance hall. Emily heard a man's deep voice talking to Mrs. Reynolds, but couldn't distinguish the words. Lily began to squirm in her arms, wanting to get down to investigate the commotion. "Calm down, little one," Emily whispered, trying to calm both the girl and her own nerves. "Let's wait a bit." But Lily wasn't the type who waited. With the agility of someone who had spent the last few months exploring every corner of the house, she freed herself from Emily's arms and ran down the corridor, shouting, "Daddy!" in a mixture of joy and anxiety. Emily followed her, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect from the meeting with Nathan Morgan. She had seen photographs of him in magazines and newspapers, always in an impeccable suit, with a serious expression that revealed no emotions. But being in the physical presence of someone was completely different from knowing them through images. When she reached the hall, she found Lily clinging to the leg of a tall, dark-haired man with slightly disheveled hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. Nathan Morgan was even more imposing in person than in photographs. There was an intensity in his presence that seemed to fill the space around him, as if the air became denser when he was nearby. He wore dark jeans and a white dress shirt with rolled-up sleeves, a casual combination that contrasted with the formality Emily had expected. But what impressed her most was the expression on his face as he looked at his daughter. For a moment, the mask of coldness disappeared, revealing something that seemed like vulnerability mixed with guilt. He crouched down to Lily's height, running his hand through the girl's golden hair with a delicacy that surprised Emily. "Hi, Princess," he said, and there was a hoarseness in his voice that suggested emotional exhaustion. "I missed you." Lily kissed her father's face with childish enthusiasm, chattering about everything that had happened in his absence. The flowers she had planted with Emily, the bird that had built a nest in the bedroom window, the new book she had learned to read. It was a torrent of information poured out with the anxiety of someone who had much to tell and little time to it. It was at that moment that Nathan raised his eyes and saw Emily. The impact was immediate and disturbing. His eyes traveled over her from head to toe, not invasively, but with the precision of someone evaluating an unexpected situation. Emily felt her face heat up under the scrutiny, suddenly conscious of her simple appearance. She wore faded jeans, a beige wool blouse and worn sneakers. Her brown hair was tied in a practical ponytail without pretensions. There was nothing in her appearance that justified the intensity with which he was observing her. "Who are you?" The question came out harsher than he probably intended. Emily swallowed, trying to find her voice. "Emily Parker. I'm Lily's nanny." "Nanny?" Nathan frowned, as if the word was strange in his mouth. "Since when?" 8 months, she answered, forcing herself to maintain a professional tone. "I was hired by your assistant, Victoria." The name of Victoria provoked a subtle change in Nathan's expression. His eyes narrowed slightly, and Emily realized she had touched on a sensitive subject. She didn't know Victoria Hayes well, Nathan's personal assistant, who appeared at the mansion sporadically to resolve administrative matters. The woman had always been cordial but distant, treating Emily as just another temporary employee. Victoria didn't mention she had hired someone, Nathan said, and there was a coldness in his voice that made Emily shiver. Maybe because you were, she began, but stopped herself before saying something that might sound impertinent. Busy, he completed, with bitter irony. Is that what they're calling it now? Lily, sensing the tension between the adults, clung more tightly to her father's leg. Emily is my friend, Daddy. She makes pancakes and tells me stories before bed. The girl's innocent defense seemed to disarm some of Nathan's rigidity. He looked at his daughter, then at Emily, as if trying to understand the dynamic that had been established in his absence. Can we talk? He said, addressing Emily. It wasn't exactly a request. Emily nodded, taking Lily by the hand. Let's go. Play in your room, little one. Daddy and I need to talk about grown-up things. Boring things, Lily declared with the wisdom of someone who had already identified the tone of serious conversations. Emily smiled, despite the tension. Exactly. Very boring. After handing Lily over to Mrs. Reynolds's care, Emily followed Nathan to the office on the main floor. It was a masculine environment, with dark wood shelves, a large mahogany desk, and leather armchairs. The walls were decorated with abstract paintings that probably cost more than she earned in a year. There was a smell of waxed wood and an almost imperceptible touch of expensive male perfume. Nathan served himself whiskey from a discreet bar in the corner of the room, not offering anything to Emily. She stood near the door, hands intertwined, waiting for him to take the initiative in the conversation. The silence extended for a few minutes, punctuated only by the ticking of a pendulum clock. Tell me about your experience with children, he finally said, without turning to look at her. I don't have formal training in pedagogy or child psychology, Emily admitted, but I grew up in orphanages. I know what it's like to need someone who genuinely cares. The answer seemed to surprise him. Nathan turned, glass in hand, studying her with renewed interest. Orphanages? I was abandoned at age 2. I spent my childhood and adolescence in the adoption system. Emily didn't know why she was being so honest with a stranger, but there was something in his presence that extracted truths. I learned that a child doesn't need perfection. They need consistency. And have you been consistent with my daughter? I've tried. Emily hesitated before continuing. She's an amazing girl, Mr. Morgan. Intelligent, affectionate, but she's hungry for paternal attention. She talks about you all the time. Nathan took a sip of whiskey, and Emily saw something that could be pain quickly cross his eyes. Things have been complicated. I imagine. The word came out before she could censor herself. You imagine? There was a dangerous irritation in his voice. What exactly do you imagine, Miss Parker? Emily forced herself to maintain eye contact. I imagine it's difficult to be a single father while dealing with professional pressures. I imagine you feel guilty about being absent. And I imagine that your daughter understands much more than you'd like. The silence that followed was charged with tension. Nathan placed the glass on the table with more force than necessary, the noise echoing through the room. Emily prepared herself to be fired right there, but he surprised her. Victoria informed me about some recent developments. Nathan approached, and Emily realized he was even taller than she had imagined. There are rumors that prosecutors intend to request my preventive detention. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Mr. Morgan, don't worry, I haven't been formally accused of anything yet. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that revealed more anxiety than he probably intended to show. But the situation is becoming unsustainable. My public image is destroyed. Shareholders are pressuring for my resignation, and Lily is growing up amid this chaos. Emily didn't know what to answer. Part of her felt sorry for the man in front of her, but another part wondered if he was really innocent of the accusations. Corporate scandals were rarely the result of misunderstandings. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Nathan studied her for a long moment as if making an important decision. Because I have a proposal for you. What kind of proposal? Need someone to represent stability in my life. Someone investors and the media see as evidence that I'm a family man, trustworthy, with clear priorities. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I need a wife. Emily blinked, sure she had misunderstood. Excuse me? A temporary wife, Nathan clarified. For 2 months. You would accompany me to public events, business trips, social meetings. For all intents and purposes, we would be a loving couple trying to rebuild our family after recent tragedies. The proposal was so absurd that Emily almost laughed. Mr. Morgan, I would offer $100,000 for the period, he interrupted. In addition to fully funding your university studies, if you're interested, a lifetime health plan and a life insurance policy of $500,000. The amount of money left her speechless. It was more than she had earned in her entire life combined, enough to completely change her prospects, to have the kind of security she had always dreamed of but never believed possible. Why me? She asked, her voice coming out weaker than intended. Because Lily trusts you, because you're not part of the social circles that know me, and because... He hesitated. Because there's something genuine about you that would be difficult to fake. Emily felt her face heat up again. This is crazy. It's a practical solution to a complex problem. Nathan came closer, and she could smell his cologne, mixed with something that could be adrenaline. You help me save my company and my reputation, and I ensure you never have to worry about financial stability again. And if we're discovered? If someone realizes it's all a lie? We won't be. We're 2 people who met through Lily and fell in love. A romantic story that the media will love to explore. His eyes fixed on hers with a disturbing intensity. You would have to move to my apartment in New York City during the week, return here on weekends. You would have to learn to behave like my wife in public. You would have to convince me that you love me. And in private, the question came out before she could censor herself. Something darkened in Nathan's gaze. In private, each maintains their boundaries. Emily felt a shiver that she couldn't identify whether it was fear or something else. The proposal was insane, risky, potentially dangerous. But it also represented a chance to have everything she had always wanted but never thought she would have. Security, education, a planned future instead of an improvised one. And there was Lily, the girl who had become the center of her world in recent months, who needed stability and affection. If Emily accepted, she could ensure that she would continue to be part of the child's life. I need to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. Nathan went back behind the desk, resuming the formal posture. Victoria will be here at 9 o'clock to discuss the contractual details if you accept. Emily nodded, feeling dizzy with everything that had been said. She was almost leaving the room when his voice stopped her. Miss Parker? She turned. I know it sounds like a cold business proposal, but I want you to understand that it's not just about money or appearances. He hesitated, and for a moment seemed younger, more vulnerable. Lily needs you, and I need to be sure that she'll be okay, regardless of what happens to me. Emily felt something move in her chest, a dangerous sensation that she preferred not to identify. Good night, Mr. Morgan. Nathan, he corrected. If we're going to do this, you'll have to call me Nathan. She nodded and left, closing the door behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. Trying to process everything that had happened, in less than an hour, her life had been turned upside down. A proposal that seemed straight out of a cheap romance novel, but that could solve all her financial problems. The problem was that Emily was beginning to suspect that money would be the least of her complications. That night, after putting Lily to bed and making sure the girl had fallen into a deep sleep, Emily lay awake in the small bed of her employee room, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Nathan's footsteps on the floor above, the muffled sound of a telephone conversation that extended into the early hours. She thought about her life up to that point. 32 years of improvisation, of accepting what appeared, of never having enough control to make long-term plans. She thought of the nights she had gone to bed hungry, the jobs she had lost because she had nowhere to leave her clothes to be washed, the opportunities that went unnoticed because she didn't have money to take advantage of them. She thought of Lily with her large, trusting eyes, always asking when Emily was leaving like all the other important people in her life. And she thought of Nathan, the way he had looked at her, as if trying to decipher an enigma. There was something dangerous about him, an intensity that made her feel things she preferred not to feel, but there was also pain there, and a loneliness that she recognized very well. When the sun rose over the mountains of Aspen, Emily had already made her decision. At 9 o'clock sharp, Victoria Hayes arrived with a folder full of documents. She was an elegant, middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than Emily's monthly salary. There was a coldness in her clear eyes that made Emily uncomfortable, as if she were an object being evaluated. "So you accepted," Victoria said without preamble. She didn't seem surprised or particularly pleased. "I accepted," Emily confirmed. "Nathan asked me to clarify some points of the agreement." Victoria opened the folder, removing several documents. "This is a confidentiality agreement. Everything you see, hear, or witness during these 2 months must remain in absolute secrecy, even after the end of the agreement." Emily signed without fully reading. If she were to analyze each clause, she would probably change her mind. "This is the schedule of public events." Victoria passed another paper. 3 business dinners, 2 international trips, 1 charity event, and an interview for an economics magazine. "You'll need a completely new wardrobe. I don't have money for... It's already taken care of. Tomorrow you'll have a personal shopper and a session with a hairdresser." Victoria examined her critically. "Considerable work will be necessary." Emily felt her cheeks flush with humiliation, but forced herself to maintain composure. It was just the beginning. "And what about the more personal aspects?" she asked. Nathan was clear about the boundaries. "You'll share the same apartment, but we'll have separate rooms. In public, you should demonstrate convincing affection. In private, each maintains their privacy." Victoria stared at her directly. "But remember, Miss Parker, this is a job. Don't confuse yourself by thinking it's something more." The tone of warning was clear. Emily nodded, though part of her wondered why Victoria felt the need to make this alert. "When do we start?" "This afternoon. Nathan will take you to New York City." Victoria put away the documents. "And, Miss Parker, I hope you understand the responsibility you're assuming. There's much more at stake here than just money." After Victoria left, Emily went upstairs to pack her few belongings. She found Lily in the bedroom, playing with dolls on the bed. "Are you leaving too?" the girl asked without raising her eyes from the dolls. Emily sat down beside her. "I'm not leaving, little one. I'm going to New York City with your daddy, but we'll come back on weekends." "Promise?" "Promise." Lily finally looked at her, her blue eyes too serious for a 3-year-old child. "Are you going to be my new mommy?" The question hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. "No, love. Your mommy is in heaven, remember? I'm just a special friend of your daddy's." "But do you love me like you were my mommy?" Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. "Yes, I do, little one, very much." Lily smiled and returned to the dolls, apparently satisfied with the answer. But Emily sat there, realizing that she had emotionally complicated herself before even beginning. 2 hours later, she was in the helicopter next to Nathan, flying toward New York City. He didn't speak during the entire journey, busy with calls and emails on his tablet. Emily took the opportunity to observe him discreetly, trying to understand the man with whom she had agreed to represent a marriage. Nathan Morgan was certainly attractive, in a way that made women look twice in the street. But there was something more than simple physical beauty. It was the way he occupied the space around him, the natural confidence in his movements, the intensity that radiated even when he was quiet. Emily caught herself imagining what it would be like to be really desired by a man like that, and immediately scolded herself for the thought. It was just a job. A very well-paid job. His apartment in the Upper East Side was the type she had only seen in decoration magazines. 3 floors, panoramic view of the city, designer furniture, and a kitchen that seemed straight out of a cooking show. It had the same air of cold perfection as the mansion in Aspen. "Your room," Nathan said, opening a door on the second floor. It was a spacious area, with a king-size bed, closet, and private bathroom. The windows overlooked an impeccably maintained internal garden. "It's beautiful," Emily said, genuinely impressed. "The closet already has some basic pieces. Victoria chose based on your measurements." He hesitated at the door. "Dinner is at 8. Tonight we have our first public appearance." "Already?" "A business dinner. Nothing too elaborate." His eyes met hers. "Just try to seem in love." And then he left, leaving Emily alone with the magnitude of what she had agreed to do. At 8 o'clock sharp, she came down the stairs wearing an elegant black dress that probably cost more than her 3-month salary. The hairdresser had transformed her hair into sophisticated waves, and the makeup artist had created a look that made her feel like a completely different version of herself. Nathan was waiting for her in the living room, adjusting the cuffs of his dress shirt. When he saw her, he stopped what he was doing and looked at her for a long moment. "You look different," he said. "Better?" Emily asked, insecure. "Dangerous," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made her heart race. In the car on the way to the restaurant, Nathan explained the basics about the people they would meet. Important investors, some board members of the company, journalists, all curious to meet the woman who had won the heart of the most coveted bachelor in the financial market. "Remember," he said when they arrived at the location, "we met a year through Lily. You came to work as a nanny and we gradually fell in love. It's a romantic story enough to satisfy the press." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. When Nathan got out of the car and went around to open her door, extending his hand to help her out, she realized that the game had begun. His touch was electric, even through the gloves he wore. When he intertwined his fingers with hers on the walk to the restaurant entrance, Emily felt her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with nervousness. "Relax," he whispered in her ear, his hot breath against her skin. "You're doing very well." And at that moment, with the camera flashes illuminating their faces and Nathan's strong arm around her waist, Emily realized that perhaps the greatest danger of that farce wasn't being discovered. The greatest danger was that she might begin to believe it was real. The dinner was a refined torture. Emily smiled at strangers, answered questions about how she had fallen in love with Nathan, allowed him to put his arm around her shoulders with a naturalness that made her tremble inside. Each of his touches seemed to burn through the fabric of the dress. Each glance exchanged in public carried an intensity that she didn't know if it was part of the act or something genuinely dangerous. The investors received her with barely disguised curiosity. Some seemed genuinely enchanted with the romantic story that Nathan told with impressive eloquence. Others, especially the women, examined her with the critical gaze of someone looking for flaws in the facade. Emily forced herself to keep smiling, even when Rebecca Morton, wife of one of the main shareholders, made seemingly innocent comments about how interesting it was that Nathan had chosen someone so simple after Isabella. "Simplicity can be very attractive," Nathan replied, gently squeezing Emily's hand on the table, "especially after unnecessary complications." The response was polite, but there was a coldness in his voice that didn't go unnoticed. Emily realized that there were tensions there that went far beyond the current situation. Isabella had circulated in these same environments, probably knew these same people, and from what she was understanding between the lines, not everyone had good memories of Nathan's deceased wife. During dessert, when the conversation drifted to business matters that didn't directly concern Emily, she allowed herself to observe Nathan in his natural element. He spoke with authority about international markets, investment strategies, economic projections. It was impressive to see him command the attention of men who moved billions of dollars even while under federal investigation. There was an almost arrogant confidence in the way he positioned himself, as if the accusations were just a temporary inconvenience. But Emily also noticed the signs of tension, the way his fingers drummed impatiently on the table when he thought no one was looking, the way his jaw contracted slightly when someone mentioned the investigations, the excessive care in the choice of words, as if each sentence was potentially incriminating. "Nathan told me you grew up in orphanages," said Richard Ferguson, one of the most influential investors at the table. "It must have been difficult." Emily felt all eyes turn to her. It was an apparently innocent question, but loaded with implicit judgment. People like those didn't usually mix with people like her, and everyone knew it. "It was formative," she replied, keeping her voice firm. "It teaches you to value what really matters." "And what really matters to you?" Rebecca asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emily saw Nathan tense beside her. It was a trap question, and everyone at the table knew it. If she said money, she would be judged as self-interested. If she said love, she would be seen as naive. "Family," she answered, looking directly at Nathan. "Building something real with the people we choose to love." The answer seemed to satisfy most of those present, but Emily saw something different pass through Nathan's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition, as if she had said exactly what he needed to hear, but in a way he hadn't expected. The rest of the evening passed without major incidents. But when they finally arrived back at the apartment, Emily felt exhausted by the constant performance. Being observed, judged, analyzed for hours on end was more tiring than any physical work she had ever done. "You did well," Nathan said as she took off her high heels in the entrance hall. "Better than I expected." "Thank you, I think," Emily replied, making a face when her feet touched the cold floor. "They didn't like me much." "They didn't like you being with me," he corrected. "That's different." Emily looked at him, confused. Nathan had loosened his tie and unbuttoned the first buttons of his shirt, revealing a small portion of his tanned chest. There was something more relaxed in his posture now that they were away from public view, but also a melancholy she hadn't noticed before. "Why does that matter to them?" she asked. Nathan served himself whiskey at the living room bar, the same ritual she had observed in the office in Aspen. "Because they knew Isabella, and because, he hesitated. "Because some of them benefited from the instability after her death." "What do you mean?" "Isabella had a significant stake in the company. When she died, her shares went to a trust, administered by third parties until Lily turns 18. Nathan took a sip, looking out the window at the city lights. "Some of our friends tonight made very generous offers to buy those shares at prices well below market." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "You think they—" "I think in New York, as in any place where a lot of money circulates, sudden death arouses interest beyond mourning," he said dryly. "But I don't have proof of anything." The silence that followed was heavy. Emily realized that she was diving into much deeper and more dangerous waters than she had imagined. It wasn't just about pretending to be the wife of a businessman with legal problems. There were people with obscure motivations, enough money to corrupt investigations, and a 3-year-old child at the center of it all. "Nathan," she began, but he interrupted her. "You'd better go up and rest. Tomorrow we have our first business trip." The sudden coldness in his voice caught her off guard. During dinner he had been attentive, protective even. Now he seemed to be closing off again, rebuilding the barriers that for a few moments had seemed lower. Emily went up to her room without saying goodnight, but had difficulty falling asleep. She lay in the king-size bed, surrounded by luxury she had never imagined possessing, thinking about the complexity of the situation she had gotten herself into. When she finally managed to sleep, her dreams were populated by judgmental looks, trap questions, and the disturbing sensation of Nathan's fingers intertwined with hers. The trip to Miami the next day was her first experience on a private jet. Emily tried not to show how impressed she was with the plane that seemed more like a flying apartment, but she noticed that Nathan was observing her reactions with something that could be amusement. "First time?" he asked when she lingered admiring the view of the clouds through the window. "On a private jet. On any plane," she admitted. "I never had reasons to travel by plane." The answer seemed to remind him again of the difference between their worlds. Nathan turned his attention to the documents he was reviewing, but Emily noticed that he looked at her more frequently than was necessary. The hotel in Miami was the kind that appeared in movies about rich and sophisticated people. Emily felt completely out of place in the marble lobby, surrounded by guests who seemed to have been born to frequent places like that. But when Nathan put his arm around her waist and addressed the reception as if she belonged there, Emily forced herself to raise her chin and pretend she had the right to be in that space. "Mrs. Morgan," the hotel manager said with exaggerated reverence, "it's an honor to receive you." Emily almost turned her head to look for another person before remembering that it was she who was being called Mrs. Morgan. The false name in her mouth sounded strange, like clothes that didn't fit. Right. The presidential suite was obscenely luxurious. 2 living rooms, private bar, jacuzzi on the balcony with a view of the ocean, and a bed that could accommodate an entire family. Emily stood in the middle of the main living room, suddenly aware that they would have to share the same space for 3 days. "I can sleep on the couch," she offered. "Don't be ridiculous, the bed is big enough for 2 entire countries." Nathan dropped the suitcases in the closet. "Besides, if the hotel staff see a newlywed couple sleeping separately, our story will lose credibility." The logic was irrefutable, but the idea of sharing a bed with Nathan made Emily's stomach flip in ways that had nothing to do with nervousness. Since the night before, she had noticed things about him that she preferred not to have noticed. The way his shoulders filled out the dress shirt, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was concentrating, the deep sound of his laughter when something really amused him. The SIP business event that night was a cocktail party for international investors interested in the American market. Emily had spent the afternoon with a personal stylist that Victoria had hired, trying on dresses that cost more than she earned in months. The end result was a red dress that hugged her curves in a way that made her feel both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. When she came out of the bathroom and found Nathan adjusting his tie in the mirror, he stopped what he was doing and looked at her for a long moment. "Christ," he murmured, so low that she almost didn't hear. "Is it bad?" Emily asked, insecure. "It's dangerous," he replied, echoing the words from the night before. But this time there was something more raw in his voice, less controlled. At the cocktail party, Emily felt the difference in how she was treated. People looked at her with more respect, men greeted her with more attention, women studied her with barely disguised envy. The dress had transformed not only her appearance, but the way others perceived her. Nathan didn't leave her side, always keeping a hand on her back or shoulders. To outside observers, it seemed like loving possessiveness. But Emily was beginning to suspect that there was more protection than performance in that proximity. It was during a conversation with German investors that she noticed the first sign of a real problem. Nathan was explaining some aspects of American legislation when one of the Germans casually mentioned that he had privileged information about the federal investigations. "I heard that some very interesting documents have recently appeared," the man said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Documents that could completely change the course of the accusations." Emily felt Nathan tense beside her, although he maintained an impassive expression. "Documents?" he asked casually. "Banking. Records mainly, from accounts that supposedly didn't exist." The German took a sip of champagne. "Of course, the authenticity is still being verified, but if they're real..." He left the sentence hanging in the air, but the implication was clear. Nathan was being blackmailed, or at least threatened with evidence that could definitively incriminate him. The rest of the night passed in a fog of disguised tension. Nathan continued to be the perfect host, but Emily could feel the rigidity in his muscles, see the lines of concern that he tried to hide behind the social smile. When they returned to the suite, he immediately went to the bar and served himself, whiskey with hands that trembled slightly. "Nathan," Emily began, but he raised his hand to silence her. "No," he said, his voice harsher than normal. "I don't want to talk about it." "But if someone is trying..." "I said I don't want to talk about it." He turned to her, and Emily saw something that scared her in his eyes. It wasn't just anger or frustration. It was barely disguised desperation. "You don't understand what these people are capable of. How much money is at stake? How many reputations can be destroyed?" "Then explain to me," Emily said, taking a step toward him. "Help me understand." "You want to understand?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "You want to know what kind of man agreed to pretend to be married, What kind of father leaves his 3-year-old daughter alone while fighting not to go to prison? The pain in his voice was raw, unfiltered. Emily felt something move in her chest, an impulse to comfort him that went far beyond the terms of their agreement. "Do you want to know if I'm guilty of the accusations?" he continued, approaching her with slow, determined steps. "If I really manipulated documents, evaded taxes, laundered money?" Emily swallowed hard. He was very close now, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, the smell of his cologne mixed with whiskey and adrenaline. "I know you're not a bad man," she said softly. "You don't know anything about me." But his voice had lost some of its hardness. "You don't know the choices I've made, the lines I've crossed." "Then tell me." They stood there looking at each other, surrounded by a tension that went far beyond professional. Emily could see the internal struggle in his eyes, the desire to open up fighting against years of self-control. "Emily," he said, and her name came out as a warning. "What?" "You need to stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you really care about me." Her response came out before she could think, "And if I did care?" The silence that followed was loaded with dangerous possibilities. Nathan raised his hand and touched her face, his thumb tracing a soft line across her cheek. "That would be a complication that neither of us can afford," he said, but didn't remove his hand. Emily leaned her face into the touch, closing her eyes for a moment. Maybe some complications are worth it. When she opened her eyes, she saw that he was even closer, close enough that she could count the dark eyelashes, see the small lines of tiredness around his eyes. "Emily," he repeated, but this time it sounded like a plea. She leaned toward him, almost without noticing the movement. Nathan did the same, until they were inches apart, breaths mingling, hearts beating at an accelerated rhythm. The kiss, when it finally happened, was as inevitable as a summer storm. It started soft, almost experimental, but quickly transformed into something more urgent, more desperate. Emily felt his hands on her waist, pulling her closer, and lost any pretense of self-control. She had been kissed before, of course, but never like this. Never with an intensity that seemed to consume all the oxygen in the environment, that made her legs weaken and her mind become completely empty of rational thoughts. Nathan's hands moved up her back, tangled in her hair, undoing the elaborate hairstyle that had taken an hour to perfect. Emily didn't care. She didn't care about anything beyond the sensation of his lips against hers, the way their bodies fit together perfectly. It was the sound of the phone ringing that brought them back to reality. They separated abruptly, breathless, looking at each other with a mixture of surprise and something close to panic. The phone continued to ring insistently. Nathan ran his hand through his hair, trying to compose himself, and answered with a hello, harsher than normal. Emily couldn't hear the complete conversation, but she realized it was something serious. By the way his expression changed. When he hung up, he was paler than before. "What was it?" she asked. "It was Victoria. There was an incident in Aspen." He headed to the closet, starting to take out travel clothes. "Someone broke into the property during the night. The security guards managed to scare them off, but—" "Lily?" Emily felt her heart race. "She's fine. Mrs. Reynolds took her to a secure room as soon as the alarm went off." Nathan turned to her. "But we need to go back, now." As they hastily packed, Emily tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. The kiss, the invasion, the possible blackmail. Her life, which had already been turned upside down once, was becoming even more complicated. On the flight back to New York, they barely spoke. Nathan was tense, constantly making calls, organizing additional security measures. Emily looked out the window, unconsciously touching her lips, still feeling the taste of him. When they arrived at the mansion in Aspen, it was already dawn. Lily was sleeping soundly in Mrs. Reynolds' room, apparently unaffected by the scare of the night before. Emily observed her for a few minutes, feeling a wave of maternal protection that surprised her with its intensity. "She didn't even notice what happened," Mrs. Reynolds whispered. "For her, it was just an adventure sleeping in my room." But when Emily went down to meet Nathan in the office, she discovered that the situation was more serious than they had imagined. It wasn't a random invasion, he said, showing photographs that the security guards had taken. They knew exactly where to look. They went straight to my office, tried to force the safe. Looking for what? Documents, evidence, something that could incriminate me or clear me of the accusations. Nathan threw the photos on the desk. The question is, who knew we would be out of town? The implication was clear. Someone close had leaked information about the trip to Miami, someone Nathan trusted enough to share his agenda. "Where's Victoria?" Emily asked, suddenly realizing she hadn't seen the assistant since they arrived. Good question. Nathan picked up the phone. She should have come here as soon as she knew about the invasion. But when he called Victoria, the call went straight to voicemail, and when they tried to locate her in the apartment where she lived in New York City, they discovered she had left the night before and hadn't returned. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. Victoria was the only person who knew all the details of the marriage farce, who had access to Nathan's schedule, who knew about the trip to Miami. If she was involved in the invasion. "Nathan," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Lily appeared in the office doorway in pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Why are you awake? It's very late." Emily and Nathan exchanged a look. For a moment, all the problems, all the complications, all the tensions dissolved in the face of the innocent presence of the girl. "We couldn't sleep, little one," Emily said, extending her arms. Lily ran to her, nestled in her lap as if it were the most natural place in the world. "Did you fight?" the girl asked, looking from Emily to Nathan with the frightening intuition of children. "We didn't fight," Nathan answered, but his voice was softer than it had been all night. "We were just talking about grown-up things." "Boring." "Things?" "Very boring," Emily confirmed, kissing the top of the blonde head. Lily turned in Emily's lap to look at her father. "Daddy, are you going away again?" The innocent question hit Nathan like a shot. Emily saw the pain pass through his eyes, the guilt he carried for all the absences. "I'm not going away," he said firmly, approaching the armchair where Emily was sitting with Lily. "I'm going to stay here with you. Promise?" Nathan hesitated for only a second before answering, "I promise." And at that moment, with Lily falling asleep again in Emily's lap and Nathan kneeling beside the armchair, looking at the two most important women in his life, the farce seemed more real than any truth he had ever lived. But outside the window, among the shadows of dawn, someone was watching the scene with eyes full of anger and something that could be obsession. Victoria. Hayes hadn't disappeared. She was closer than anyone imagined, and she had plans that went far beyond simple blackmail or theft of documents. She had spent 2 years planning her revenge. 2 years since Isabella Morgan had discovered her feelings for Nathan and threatened to expose her. 2 years since she had made the decision to silence the inconvenient wife forever. Now seeing Nathan with that simple woman, seeing him show more affection in one night than he had shown for Isabella in years of marriage, Victoria felt the same anger that had led her to push her rival from the balcony. Emily Parker would be easier to eliminate than Isabella had been. After all, who would question the death of an orphaned nanny with no family? Especially when it was discovered that she was blackmailing her employer, threatening to expose secrets that could destroy his life. Victoria smiled in the darkness, already imagining headlines about the greed that had led an employee to try to extort money from her vulnerable boss. It would be so easy to plant evidence, forge documents, create a convincing narrative. This time she wouldn't make the mistake of leaving loose ends. This time nothing would stand in the way between her and Nathan. Not even a 3-year-old child who had become too inconvenient a witness to live. The next morning, when Emily woke up on the office couch where she had fallen asleep with Lily in her lap, she found a note from Nathan on the table. Had to leave early for meeting with lawyers. Back in the afternoon, keep Lily close. N. There was something in the formal tone of the note that left her uneasy. After the intimacy of the night before, after the kiss that had changed everything between them, Nathan was once again distancing himself. Emily tried not to care. After all, she had entered that agreement knowing exactly what the terms were. There were no promises of real romance, no expectations beyond the public performance. But the heart, she discovered, didn't function based on contracts. She spent the day trying to keep Lily distracted, but the girl was restless, asking questions about where Victoria was, why Daddy had left so early, why Emily seemed sad. "I'm not sad, little one," Emily lied, arranging Lily's golden hair. "I'm just thinking." About what? How to explain to a 3-year-old child that her nanny had fallen in love with her father, but that she was just a temporary employee hired to pretend to be married. How to explain that there were dangerous people who might want to hurt them. "About you," Emily said finally. "I always think about you." Lily smiled, satisfied with the answer, and returned to her toys. But Emily remained restless, constantly looking out the windows, checking the doors, feeling as if something bad was approaching. When Nathan returned in the late afternoon, he was visibly shaken. There was a paleness in his face that suggested bad news. "We need to talk," he said, without even greeting her properly. They left Lily with Mrs. Reynolds and locked themselves in the office. Nathan served himself whiskey, his hands trembling, slightly. "The documents that appeared are real," he said without preamble. "Banking records of offshore accounts that I didn't even know existed. Transfers of millions of dollars made in my name, without my knowledge." Emily felt her stomach tighten. "How is that possible? Someone with access to my personal information, my passwords, my digital signature." Nathan took a large sip of whiskey. "Someone who has worked with me for years." "Victoria." "Victoria," he confirmed. "My lawyers believe she has been involved in a money laundering scheme, using my identity to cover up the operations. And when Isabella began to suspect..." He left the sentence hanging in the air, but Emily understood the implication. "You think Victoria killed your wife?" "I think Isabella discovered something she shouldn't have discovered, and I think Victoria did what was necessary to protect her schemes." Nathan placed the glass on the table with force. "The point is that now we have 2 dead people and a federal investigation that can put me in prison for the crimes she committed." 2 people? The federal investigator, who was following the money trail, was found dead yesterday morning. Apparent suicide, but with forged evidence that links me to an alleged bribery attempt. Emily let herself fall into an armchair, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. It was no longer just about corporate scandal or blackmail. There were murders involved. And someone was systematically destroying Nathan's life. "We have to go to the police," she said. "With what evidence?" "Victoria has disappeared, taking with her all the documents that could clear me. And all that remains are pieces of evidence that incriminate me." Nathan approached the window, looking at the garden where Lily was playing. "My lawyers think I have at most a week before I'm arrested. And Lily? She goes to an orphanage or to a foster family." His voice broke slightly. "I don't have close relatives, and with a father in prison for corruption and homicide." Emily felt tears burn her eyes. The idea of Lily being separated from everything she knew, growing up in the system that she herself had known, was unbearable. "Is there any way to—" "There's one possibility," Nathan interrupted her, turning to look at her directly. "But you're going to hate it." "What?" "If our marriage were real, you would have legal rights over Lily. You could ask for temporary custody while I was in prison, keep the family together until we can prove my innocence." Emily blinked, not fully understanding. "But our marriage isn't real." "It could be." Nathan approached her, taking her hands in his. "It could be real if we got married for real. Today, this very afternoon." The proposal left her speechless. It was insane, risky, completely outside any logic. Getting married for real to a man who could be arrested at any moment, assuming responsibility for a child, facing federal investigations, and possibly an obsessed assassin. "Nathan," Emily continued, her voice loaded with urgency, "I know I'm asking too much. I know you didn't sign up for this when you accepted our farce, but Lily needs you, and I..." "What?" "I need you too." The admission came out as a confession extracted by force, not just as a mother for Lily or as an alibi for the accusations. "I need you." Emily looked in his eyes and saw truth there. Not the polished and calculated truth of the businessman, but the raw and vulnerable truth of a desperate father and a man who was discovering what it meant to truly love someone. "If I accept," she said slowly, "and you're arrested, you would have sufficient resources to take care of Lily for the rest of your life. The company has insurance, emergency funds, assets that cannot be confiscated, even if I'm convicted." "It's not about money, Nathan." "Then what is it about?" Emily took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. In a few weeks, her life had completely transformed. She had found a family she never knew she wanted, had fallen in love with a man who represented everything she always thought was out of her reach, and now she was being called to make a choice that would define not only her future, but the future of the child she already loved as a daughter. "It's about being ready for this to be real," she said finally, "for it to no longer be pretense." Nathan released her hands and ran his own through his hair, a gesture of nervousness that she was learning to recognize. "And are you?" Emily thought about the night before, about the kiss that had changed everything, about the way she felt complete when she was with him and Lily. She thought about the loneliness she had carried her entire life, the hunger for belonging. That was finally being satisfied. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." The wedding happened 3 hours later, in a quick civil ceremony in Aspen. Just the two of them, 2 witnesses that Nathan knew, and a judge who asked minimal questions before declaring that they were legally married. Emily wore a simple dress that she had bought months before for another job, and Nathan wore the same suit he had worn for the meeting with the lawyers. There were no flowers, romantic music, or elaborate vows. But when he slid the ring onto her finger and she did the same, Emily felt that something fundamental had changed between them. When they returned to the mansion, Lily greeted them with shouts of joy, as if she could feel that something important had happened. "Now are you really married?" she asked with the frightening intuition of children. "Yes, little one," Emily replied, picking her up. "Now we're a real family." That night, for the first time since they had met, Emily and Nathan shared the same bed, not because of the necessity of the farce, but by choice. They didn't make love, didn't kiss with the passion of the night before. They just lay side by side, talking about the uncertain future, about fears and hopes, about the possibility of building something real amid the chaos that their lives had become. Emily fell asleep with her head on Nathan's shoulder, feeling safer than she had felt in her entire life. For the first time, she had a real family, a place where she belonged, someone who loved her for who she was. But the security was an illusion. Outside the window, Victoria was watching once again. She had seen the wedding, had understood that her plans needed to be accelerated. She could no longer wait for the perfect moment, the ideal opportunity. If Nathan was really falling in love with that woman, if he was willing to get married for real to protect her, then Emily Parker had become an even greater threat than Isabella had ever been. And threats, Victoria had learned, needed to be eliminated quickly. Tomorrow would be too late. Tonight, while they slept, protected by the false sense of security, she would finally finish what she had started 2 years ago. This time, there would be no survivors. Emily woke with a start, her heart racing from a nightmare that was already dissipating, leaving only a sensation of imminent threat. The bed was empty beside her, the sheets still warm from Nathan's body heat. Through the window, the first rays of sun cut through the morning mist of Aspen, creating dancing shadows in the room. She was married, really married. The ring on her finger seemed heavier than was physically possible, loaded with meanings that she was still trying to process. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from nanny pretending to be wife to genuine wife of a man who could be arrested at any moment. The sound of voices coming from downstairs pulled her from the bed. She recognized Nathan's deep voice, but there was another voice she couldn't identify. Wearing a robe, she went down the stairs silently, concern growing with each step. In the office, she found Nathan talking with a tall man with graying hair, wearing an impeccable suit even at that early hour. The expression on both their faces was somber. "Emily," Nathan turned when he saw her at the door. "This is Michael Sanderson, my lawyer." The man greeted her with professional courtesy, but there was urgency in his movements. "Mrs. Morgan, forgive the intrusion so early, but we had developments during the night." Mrs. Morgan, the name still sounded strange, but for the first time Emily felt she had the right to use it. "What kind of developments?" she asked, sitting in the armchair that had become hers during serious conversations. Michael exchanged a look with Nathan before answering. "The FBI has issued a temporary arrest warrant. They're coming to get Nathan this morning." Emily felt the world oscillate slightly. She knew it was a possibility, but the raw reality of the words hit her like a punch to the stomach. "How much time do we have?" she asked, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "An hour, maybe 2, Michael replied, "depending on the traffic from New York City to here." An hour. An hour to say goodbye to the man she had married less than a day ago. An hour before her adopted daughter saw her father being taken away in handcuffs. "Lily can't see this," Emily said, standing up. "She can't see her father being arrested." "Mrs. Reynolds can take her to her sister's house in town," Nathan suggested. "Make up some excuse about an unexpected trip." Emily nodded, already heading to the door. "I'll wake her up and pack a bag." "Emily," Nathan's voice stopped her. When she turned, she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Raw vulnerability, genuine fear. "Thank you for everything." She wanted to say so many things. She wanted to say she loved him, that she would fight for him, that no matter what happened, she would be waiting when he got out of prison. But with Michael present, with time running out, she just nodded and went upstairs to wake Lily. The girl was surprisingly cooperative, excited about the prospect of spending a few days with the great-aunt she rarely saw. Emily packed her bag quickly, including the favorite toys, the special blanket, and the doll that slept with her every night. "Is Daddy traveling too?" Lily asked, as Emily brushed her golden hair. "Yes, love, for work." The lie came out easier than Emily expected. "But we'll be back soon to get you." "You'll come back together?" Emily hesitated for just a second. "We'll come back together." When Lily left with Mrs. Reynolds, Emily felt as if part of her heart was being torn out. The girl waved from the car window, smiling, with no idea that the life she knew was about to crumble once again. Back in the office, she found Nathan storing important documents in a folder that he handed to Michael. There was a somber efficiency in his movements, as if he had already resigned himself to the inevitable. "How long can you stay in prison?" Emily asked. "The temporary detention can last up to 90 days, Michael replied. "Depending on the evidence they present, it can turn into preventive detention until the trial." "And how long would that take?" "With the federal court schedule, years," Nathan said dryly. "Michael, please give us a moment alone." The lawyer nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Emily and Nathan were left alone in the office, where they had had so many conversations that changed their lives. "I don't want you to wait for me," he said, without preamble. "Nathan." "No." He approached, taking her hands in his. "I don't want you to spend years visiting prisons, dealing with public scandal, being judged for being married to a criminal. You're not a criminal. It doesn't matter what I am. It matters what they can prove I am." Nathan caressed her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the hardness of his words. "Michael will initiate procedures to annul our marriage. You can go back to your life, start over." "And Lily?" "Lily will understand that sometimes people we love need to go away." His voice broke slightly. "She's been through this before." Emily moved away from him, anger rising in her throat. "I can't believe you're doing this." "Doing what?" "Giving up. On us, on Lily, on everything." She walked to the window, looking out at the garden where she had watched their daughter play so many times. "You think it's noble to free me from the promise I made yesterday, but you're actually being a coward." "Coward?" The word came out like a whip. "Yes, coward." Emily turned to face him. "You're afraid that I might actually stay, that this might be real between us. It's easier to send me away than risk believing that someone can love you enough to fight for you." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Nathan looked at her as if she had said something he didn't want to hear, but that needed to be said. "You haven't known me long enough to love me," he said finally. "Maybe not. But I've known you long enough to know you're worth trying for." Emily approached him again. "I've known you long enough to know you're a good father, an honest man, someone who would do anything to protect the people he loves. Emily, and I know you love me too." The confession came out brave, definitive. "I saw it in your eyes last night, felt it in the way you touched me. You love me, and that terrifies you." Nathan closed his eyes, as if fighting an internal battle. When he opened them again, there was something different in them. Surrender, perhaps. "Yes," he admitted, "I love you, and it terrifies me because I can't protect you from what's coming." "Then let me protect you too." He laughed bitterly. "How? I'm the one being arrested." "By trusting me. By letting me take care of Lily, the company, your reputation while you're not here." Emily took his face in her hands. "By letting me love you." The kiss that followed was different from the one the night before. There was no urgency or desperation, but a deep tenderness, the silent promise that whatever happened, they would face it together. It was interrupted by the sound of cars approaching. Through the window, Emily saw 3 black vehicles coming, up the property's road. "They're here," Nathan said, his voice strangely calm. The next few minutes passed like a blur. Polite but firm federal agents, discreet handcuffs, rights being read in a low voice. Emily observed everything standing at the door of the mansion, hands intertwined to keep them from trembling. Nathan turned to her before getting into the police car. "Take care," he said, and there was so much love and concern in those 2 words that Emily felt her eyes fill with tears. "Come back to us," she replied. And then he was gone, leaving Emily alone in the empty mansion, married for less than 24 hours and already a widow of circumstance. The days that followed passed in a fog of frantic activity. Emily moved to the New York City apartment to be closer to the lawyers and legal developments. Michael became her connection to the complicated legal world in which she found herself immersed. News of Nathan's arrest exploded in the media as she expected. Economic newspapers, television programs, gossip websites, all speculating about the guilt or innocence of the billionaire businessman. Some reports mentioned Emily as the mysterious new wife, but fortunately, her private life had not yet become the main focus of public attention. Lily returned after 3 days, confused about where her father was, accepting the vague explanations about work trip that Emily offered, but the girl was too intelligent to be completely fooled. Emily noticed that she was clingier than normal, following her around the house as if afraid that she too would disappear. It was during one of these afternoons while Lily was taking a nap, and Emily was trying to understand the financial reports that Michael had left for her to review that she received an unexpected call. "Hello, Mrs. Morgan, this is Carla Mendez from the National News. We'd like to speak with you about your husband's arrest." Emily felt her stomach tighten. She had expected calls from journalists to arrive eventually, but wasn't prepared for the feeling of invasion they brought. "I have no comments to make," she said, preparing to hang up. "Mrs. Morgan, we have information that might interest you. About Victoria Hayes." Emily stopped, breathing. "What kind of information?" "We'd prefer to talk in person. Could you receive us this afternoon?" Against all the advice that Michael had given about not talking to the press, Emily agreed to the meeting. 2 hours later, she was receiving Carla Mendez and a cameraman in her apartment. Carla was a middle-aged woman with a professional but not intimidating air. She declined coffee and went straight to the point. "Mrs. Morgan, we're investigating the connections between Victoria Hayes and some suspicious deaths that happened in the last 2 years, including that of your predecessor, Isabella Morgan." Emily forced herself to keep a neutral expression. "I don't know what you're talking about." Victoria Hayes was seen at the hotel where federal investigator Robert Stevens died. The security cameras show her entering his room hours before the death. Carla leaned forward. "We also have witnesses who saw her arguing with Isabella Morgan on the night she died." Emily's heart raced. These were the pieces of evidence they needed to clear Nathan, but coming from a source she couldn't control. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because we believe Victoria might try something against you too. You represent a threat to her plans, whatever they are." Carla took some photographs from her purse. "These were taken last night, outside this building." Emily looked at the photos and felt her blood freeze. Victoria was there, standing on the sidewalk in front of the building, looking directly at the windows of the apartment where Emily lived. "She's watching you," Carla said, "and our research suggests that when Victoria Hayes watches someone, that person doesn't survive very long." After the journalists left, Emily locked all the doors and windows of the apartment, checked the security system twice, and called Michael. "You need to go to the police immediately," he said, as soon as she told him about the journalist's visit. "If they have evidence that can clear Nathan, what if it's a trap? What if Victoria is using the journalist to lure me somewhere? You can't stay there alone with Lily, not if Victoria is really watching you." Emily looked at the girl who was playing innocently in the living room, with no idea of the danger surrounding them. "What do you suggest?" "I'll hire private security, and I'll talk to my contacts at the FBI. If we can prove Victoria is guilty of the crimes Nathan is being accused of, he can get out of prison. He can get out of prison." That night, Emily could barely sleep. Every noise in the street, every shadow that passed by the window, made her get up to check if they were safe. There were now 2 security guards in the building, but that didn't completely diminish her anxiety. It was around 3 in the morning when she heard the sound, a slight scratching at the apartment door, as if someone was trying to open the lock very slowly, trying not to make noise. Emily got up from the bed silently, grabbed the phone and headed to Lily's room. The girl was sleeping deeply, her golden hair spread over the pillow like a halo. The scratching continued. Whoever was outside was being very patient, very careful. Emily called the building security, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried the cell phone of one of the security guards that Michael had hired. Same result. Panic began to set in when she realized she was completely isolated. The sound of the lock giving way was almost inaudible, but Emily heard it. Someone had managed to get into the apartment. She picked Lily up in her arms, the girl protesting sleepily, and locked herself with her in the bathroom of the bedroom. With trembling hands, she called the police. "Police department, what's your emergency?" "Someone broke into my apartment," Emily whispered. "I'm locked in the bathroom with a 3-year-old child." "What's the address?" Emily gave the information, trying to keep her voice low while hearing cautious footsteps moving through the apartment. Whoever it was looking for something, or for someone. "The patrol car is on the way," the operator said. "Stay where you are and don't make noise." But Lily was waking up completely now, confused about why they were hiding in the bathroom in the middle of the night. "Emily, why?" she began in a normal voice. "Shh, little one," Emily whispered, gently covering the girl's mouth with her hand. "We're playing hide and seek. You need to be very quiet." Lily nodded, entering the game, but Emily could feel her confusion. The footsteps in the apartment stopped for a moment, as if whoever it was had heard the child's voice. Then they began to move toward the bedroom. Emily held Lily tighter, her heart beating so loudly that she was sure it could be heard through the door. The footsteps stopped outside the bathroom. The doorknob began to turn slowly. It was then that Emily heard the police sirens approaching on the street. The footsteps quickly moved away, running toward the exit. A door slammed, and then there was silence. When the police arrived, they found the apartment ransacked but empty. Drawers open, papers scattered, furniture displaced. Whoever had invaded was looking for something specific. "Did you see anyone leaving the building?" Emily asked one of the officers. "The night doorman was found unconscious in the lobby. He was probably drugged." The officer was making notes in a notebook. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" Emily hesitated. Saying she suspected Victoria would mean going into details about the whole situation with Nathan, the accusations, the possible murders. But looking at Lily, who was clinging to her leg in fear, she realized she had no choice. "Yes," she said, "I know exactly who it was." The next morning, Emily was sitting in a room at the FBI office telling the whole story to an investigator who seemed skeptical about every word she said. "Mrs. Morgan, you're accusing Victoria Hayes of murder based on what evidence?" "On the evidence that the journalists from National News have, on the security cameras, on the witnesses. Evidence that we haven't seen officially yet." The investigator, a bald, tired-looking man named Reynolds, didn't seem impressed. "And you want us to arrest a woman who has been missing for days based on assumptions? She broke into my apartment last night. Did you see her face?" Emily hesitated. "No, but..." "Then there's no way to prove it was her." Reynolds closed the file. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand you're under a lot of stress with your husband's arrest. But I can't start an investigation based on conspiracy theories." Emily left the FBI office frustrated and scared. The police weren't taking her accusations seriously, Victoria was free to try again, and Nathan remained in prison for crimes he hadn't committed. It was when she got home that she found a surprise waiting for her. Carla Mendez was sitting in the building's lobby with a folder full of documents. "Mrs. Morgan, we need to talk urgently," she said, standing up. "We have more information about Victoria. And this time we have evidence that the police can't ignore." In the apartment, with Lily playing in the bedroom under the watchful eyes of Mrs. Reynolds, who had come from Aspen especially to help, Carla spread photographs and documents on the dining table. "We managed to access Victoria's phone records from the last 2 years," she began. "She made calls to the federal investigator on the day he died, to Nathan's accountant in the week he fled the country, and to a laboratory specializing in document forgery." Emily looked at the call logs, her heart racing. This proves she was organizing everything. This and more. Carla took an audio recording from a digital recorder. "We got this from a source inside the company. It's a conversation between Victoria and someone unidentified, recorded 3 weeks ago." She pressed play, and Victoria's voice filled the apartment. "He's getting too close to the nanny. If they get married for real, it will complicate everything." "You said you could control the situation," replied a male voice that Emily didn't recognize. "I can. But I need more time. And I might need to eliminate the girl too." "The child?" "The child is a witness. She was at home the night I killed Isabella. If she starts remembering details..." Emily felt nausea rise in her throat. Victoria had killed Isabella, was planning to kill her, and was considering murdering a 3-year-old child to cover her tracks. "You need to take this to the police now," she said to Carla. "We already have. A colleague of mine is delivering copies to the FBI at this moment." Carla put away the documents. "But Victoria is still free and you and Lily are still in danger. What do you suggest? Leave the city, go somewhere she can't find you until she's arrested." Emily thought about Aspen, but Victoria knew the mansion. She thought about asking Michael for help, but he was too well known in legal circles. She needed a place where she could completely disappear with Lily. "I have a small farm in rural Vermont," Mrs. Reynolds offered. "Small place, isolated. No one would think to look there." It was the best option they had. Emily packed quickly, explained to Lily that they would have an adventure in the countryside, and in 2 hours they were on the road to Vermont. Mrs. Reynolds' family farm was near Woodstock, a small and simple property that seemed to have been forgotten by time. There was a main house with 2 bedrooms, an empty barn, and miles of nothing in all directions. It was perfect for hiding. Emily spent the first 2 days in a state of constant alert, checking the windows, listening for any suspicious noise. But gradually, the peace of the place began to calm her. Lily loved the freedom to run through the fields, chase chickens, play in the dirt without worrying about expensive clothes. It was on the 3rd night that Michael called with news. "Victoria has been arrested," he said without preamble. "The FBI found her trying to leave the country with fake documents." Emily let herself fall into a chair, the relief making her dizzy. "And Nathan? His detention has been revoked. He's being released tomorrow morning." "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. Emotionally..." Michael hesitated. "Prison is hard for anyone, but for someone like Nathan, used to controlling everything around..." Him. Emily understood. Nathan had spent a week feeling powerless, unable to protect his family, depending on others to fight for his innocence. It would be difficult for a man like him to accept that he had needed to be saved. Where is he? Going when he gets out? To Aspen, I imagine. That's where you were when he was arrested. Michael, don't tell him where we are yet. Let me talk to him first. Emily, please, just let me talk to him first. That night, Emily stayed awake on the porch of the Simple House, looking at the stars that shone with an impossible intensity in the city. She thought about Nathan, alone in the empty mansion, processing everything that had happened. She thought about the proud man she had met, who preferred to carry the world on his shoulders than admit he needed help. She could run back to him, throw herself into his arms, pretend that everything would return to normal now that he was free. But Emily had learned something about herself during that week. She had discovered that she was stronger than she thought, that she could make difficult decisions under pressure, that she could protect the family she had chosen. She didn't want to return to Nathan as the fragile woman who needed to be saved. She wanted to return as the woman who had helped save him. The next day she called him. "Emily!" His voice sounded hoarse, as if he hadn't slept. "Hi," she said simply. "Where are you? Michael said you left the city." "In a safe place, with Lily." "Is she okay?" "She's great. She's playing with puppies in the yard." Nathan made a long pause. "Are you okay?" "I am." Emily took a deep breath. "And you?" "I'm confused. About many things." "Like what?" "Like how you managed to prove my innocence when my own lawyers couldn't. How you protected my daughter when I wasn't there to do it. How you—" He hesitated. "How you became so important to me in such a short time." Emily felt tears burn her eyes. "Nathan." "I don't know how to be the kind of man you deserve," he said. "I don't know how to let someone help me without feeling like I'm failing. Do you want to learn?" "I do, but I don't know if I'm capable." Emily looked at Lily, who was running around the yard chasing a golden puppy, laughing with a pure joy. That had been rare in her previous life. "Come get us," she said. "Come see who we are when we're not pretending to be a family. Come see if you want to do this for real." "Emily, I love you." The words came out raw, desperate, as if he had been holding them back for a long time. "I know," she replied. "And I love you too, but love isn't enough if you can't trust me to be your real partner. How can I prove that I trust you?" Emily smiled, even knowing he couldn't see her. "By coming to get us. Without security, without lawyers, without elaborate plans, just you driving here to pick up your family." She gave the address and hung up before he could respond. 2 hours later, she heard the sound of a car coming up the dirt road. Lily ran to the window shouting, "Daddy!" with a joy that made Emily's heart tighten. Emily went out to the porch and saw Nathan getting out of a simple car, without a driver, wearing jeans and a long-sleeved shirt that made him look younger, more accessible. When their eyes met across the yard, she saw everything she needed to see. He had understood. He had chosen to come alone, vulnerable, ready to be just a man who loved his family, not the powerful executive who controlled everything around him. Lily ran to him, and Emily watched father and daughter reunite, embrace with an intensity that spoke of longing, fear, and relief. Then Nathan looked at Emily over the top of his daughter's head and walked toward her. When he reached the porch, he stopped a few inches from her. "I came to get my family," he said. "Your family is here," Emily replied, "and forever?" "Forever." The kiss that followed was different from all the others. There was no urgency, desperation, or uncertainty. It was the kiss of two people who had gone through fire together and come out stronger on the other side. When they separated, Lily was standing next to them, looking with curiosity. "Now will you stay together always?" she asked. "Always," Nathan replied, picking up his daughter and putting his free arm around Emily. "Even when you fight?" Emily laughed. "Especially when we fight." "And can I call Emily Mommy?" Nathan looked at Emily, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded, her heart overflowing. "Yes, you can, little one," he said. "You can call her Mommy." That night, after Lily fell asleep between them in the narrow bed of the simple house, Emily and Nathan talked until dawn. About the future, about the fears they still had, about how to build something real on the foundations of a farce. "I don't know if I know how to be just a man," Nathan admitted in the darkness. "I've always been the boss, the responsible one, the one who makes the decisions." "You don't need to stop being those things," Emily said, tracing lazy circles on his chest. "You just need to let me be those things too sometimes." "And if I fail? If I can't make you happy?" "Then we'll fail together and we'll try again." Nathan pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "How did you get so wise?" "Growing up alone. Learning that sometimes the best families are those we choose, not those we're born into." The next morning, the three of them returned to New York City together, in the simple car that Nathan had driven alone. There were no helicopters, security guards, or entourage. Just a family returning home. The media was still interested in Nathan's story, of course, but now it was a story of redemption, not scandal. The businessman exonerated, the wife who fought for his freedom, the family reunited after the tragedy. Emily learned to deal with public attention, to give careful interviews when necessary, to protect Lily's privacy while publicly supporting her husband. But what mattered most happened away from the cameras. In the mornings when they woke up embracing, in the afternoons when Nathan left the office early to pick up Lily from school, in the evenings when they stayed talking about dreams and plans after the girl fell asleep. Victoria was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murders of Isabella and the federal investigator. During the trial, more details came to light about her obsession with Nathan, about how she had manipulated Isabella to make her appear unstable, about how she had forged evidence to incriminate the man she loved when he refused to reciprocate her feelings. Emily attended the trial every day, holding hands with Nathan, finally understanding the magnitude of the danger they had faced. Victoria wasn't just a corrupt employee. She was a woman who had completely lost control of reality, who had killed for unrequited love, and who would continue killing until she got what she wanted. But now she was in prison, and they were free to build the life they had chosen. 6 months after the hasty civil wedding, they renewed their vows in a small, intimate ceremony in Aspen. This time Lily was the flower girl, throwing rose petals along the path as Emily walked toward Nathan wearing a simple, elegant dress that she had chosen herself. When they exchanged rings again, this time by choice and not by necessity, Emily felt that she had finally found what she had been looking for her entire life, a family that couldn't be taken from her. A love that had been tested by fire and survived, a future that they would write together, page by page, day by day. And when Nathan kissed her at the altar, with Lily clapping beside them and the sun setting over the mountains, Emily knew that some stories really did have happy endings, especially those that began with lies and transformed into truths more beautiful than any fiction could imagine. 3 months after the vow renewal, Emily discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, when the morning sickness began and exhaustion became constant. But it was only when she missed lunch for the 3rd consecutive time that she decided to take the test. The positive result left her sitting on the bathroom floor for 15 minutes, looking at the 2 pink lines as if they were impossible to decipher hieroglyphics. Pregnant. She was going to have a baby with Nathan. The idea both thrilled and terrified her in equal proportions. Since they had truly married, they had talked about having children, but always as something distant, something for the future when things calmed down. Now the future had arrived, whether they wanted it or not. Emily put the test in the drawer and spent the rest of the day observing Nathan interact with Lily, trying to imagine what it would be like with a baby. He was a wonderful father to the girl, attentive and affectionate, but there was always a shadow of guilt in his eyes when he played with her, the guilt for all the absences, for all the time lost during the first years of her life. Would it be different with this baby? Would he be able to be present from the beginning, build the relationship he had always wanted to have with Lily? "You're quiet today," Nathan commented during dinner, when Lily had already gone upstairs to take a bath. Did something happen? Emily almost told him right there, but something held her back. Maybe it was the way he had become tense when Michael had called earlier, talking about new problems at the company. Maybe it was the tiredness she saw in his eyes, the result of weeks trying to rebuild the reputation of Morgan Holdings. The scandal had passed, but the economic consequences were still being felt. "I'm just tired," she said, which technically wasn't a lie. Nathan leaned over the table and took her hand. "Are you sure? You've been different lately." "Different how?" "More. I don't know, distant, worried?" He caressed her fingers with his thumb. "If it's about the company's finances, you don't need to worry. We'll overcome this." Emily nodded, but it wasn't about money that she was worried. It was about how to tell the man she loved that he would be a father again, without knowing if the news would be received as a blessing or a complication. That night, lying in bed next to Nathan, who had finally fallen asleep after hours reviewing reports, Emily placed her hand on her still flat stomach and tried to imagine a life growing there inside. A mixture of her and Nathan. A child who would never know the insecurity she had felt, who would grow up surrounded by love from the first day. The idea made her smile in the darkness, and for the first time since she had seen the positive test, she felt more joy than fear. The next morning, Emily decided to tell Lily first. "Little one," she said while brushing the girl's golden hair, "what do you think about having a little brother or sister?" Lily stopped playing with her doll and looked at Emily through the mirror. "A baby? A baby." The girl's eyes lit up. "For real? In your tummy?" Emily laughed at the directness of the question. "Yes, in my tummy." Lily turned in the chair, placing her small hands on Emily's stomach. "Hi, baby," she whispered seriously. "I'm your big sister. I'll teach you how to play and not be afraid of storms." The simplicity and immediate love in the girl's voice made Emily's eyes fill with tears. At least one person in the family was definitely happy with the news. "Shall we tell Daddy together?" Emily suggested. "Yes, he'll be so happy." Emily hoped Lily was right. They prepared an elaborate surprise for Nathan. Lily drew a picture of the family that now included 4 stick figures instead of 3, and Emily made his favorite dish for dinner. When he arrived from the office, he found the two smiling suspiciously. "What are you two plotting?" he asked, kissing first Lily, then Emily. "We have a surprise for you," Lily announced, barely able to contain her excitement. During dinner, Emily felt the nerves grow. What if Nathan wasn't ready? What if the news came at a bad time? The company was still recovering. He was working 16 hours a day trying to regain the investors' confidence. "Daddy," Lily said when they finished dessert, "look what I drew for you." She handed the drawing with ceremony. Nathan studied it, for a moment, smiling at the colorful figures. "It's beautiful, Princess, but there are 4 people here. Who is this?" He pointed to the smaller figure that Lily had drawn between Emily and himself. "It's my little brother," Lily exclaimed. "Or sister, we don't know yet." Emily watched Nathan's face as the information registered. She saw the exact moment when he understood, when his eyes moved from the drawing to her face, seeking confirmation. "Emily?" The word came out in a whisper. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but seemed like an eternity. Then Nathan got up from his chair so quickly that it almost toppled over, went around the table, and pulled Emily into an embrace that lifted her off the ground. "Really?" he asked, his face buried in her neck. "For real?" "For real." When he put her down and looked at her, Emily saw tears in his eyes. "How are you feeling? When did you find out? Why didn't you tell me before?" "I'm fine. I found out yesterday. And I didn't tell you before because I wanted to be sure how you would react." "How I would react?" Nathan took her face in his hands. "I'm happy, very happy, scared but happy." "Scared why?" "Because I don't want to make the same mistakes I made with Lily. I don't want to miss any moment this time." Emily felt her heart tighten with emotion. "You won't miss it. We're together now." Nathan kissed her tenderly, then bent down and kissed her stomach over her clothes. "Hi, baby," he whispered, echoing Lily's words. "I'm your daddy. I can't wait to meet you." Lily clapped her hands, delighted with her father's reaction. "Now can we buy a crib, and clothes and toys?" Emily laughed, but Nathan suddenly became serious. "We need to schedule an appointment with the obstetrician. Have you been taking vitamins? Are you eating right? You need to stop carrying weight." "Nathan," Emily interrupted him, touching his face. "Everything will be fine." But she could see the concern in his eyes, the need to control everything to ensure that nothing went wrong this time. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Nathan insisted on hiring the best obstetrician in the country, transformed one of the apartment's rooms into a temporary office so Emily wouldn't have to travel for consultations, and hired a nutritionist to plan all her meals. "You're being excessive," Emily said, when he brought home the third book about pregnancy of the week. "I'm being careful," he corrected, sitting next to her on the couch. "I want you and the baby to have the very best. We have you." Emily knew that his overprotective behavior came from fear. Fear of losing another baby, another wife, another family. Isabella had died when Lily was small, and although the circumstances were completely different, the trauma still haunted Nathan. The company was also demanding more and more of his attention. Although Nathan had been cleared of the criminal charges, the reputation of Morgan Holdings was still shaken. Several investors had withdrawn their money, important contracts had been cancelled, and the competition was taking advantage of the fragility to steal customers. Emily saw the stress in the tense lines of Nathan's shoulders, in the way he obsessively checked emails, in the phone conversations that extended into the early hours. "Maybe I can help more," she suggested one night, when he came home especially late. "How?" "I don't know. Participate in more social events. Do networking. Show that the Morgan family is united and strong." Nathan shook his head. "You're pregnant. I don't want you to stress yourself with work." "Some social meetings won't kill me, Nathan, and maybe it's exactly what we need to show that we've overcome the crisis." But he remained resistant, insisting that Emily should focus only on the pregnancy and taking care of Lily. It was frustrating, especially when she felt perfectly capable of helping to solve the company's problems. The tension between them grew gradually, fueled by small conflicts about independence versus protection. Emily wanted to go to the supermarket alone. Nathan insisted that she use the driver. Emily wanted to continue taking Lily to school. Nathan thought she should rest more. Emily wanted to participate in the decisions about the nursery. Nathan had already hired a designer without consulting her. It was during a discussion about Lily's 4th birthday party that things exploded. "You already hired the caterer without asking me," Emily said, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's our daughter's party. I should have participated in the decision. You were tired last night. I didn't want to bother you with details." "Details?" Emily let out a laugh without humor. "Nathan, you've been making all the decisions alone for weeks. About the baby, about Lily, about my own life. I'm trying to take care of you. You're trying to control me." The words came out harsher than she intended, but it was the truth. "The same way you try to control everything when you're afraid." Nathan stopped reviewing the papers he was holding and looked at her directly. "I'm not trying to control you." "No? Then why have I had 3 medical appointments that I didn't request? Why is there a security guard following me when I leave? The building? Why did you hire a new housekeeper without consulting me?" "Because, Nathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that she had learned to associate with frustration. "Because I can't lose you." The raw confession silenced Emily for a moment. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the genuine fear that motivated him, but that didn't make his behavior more acceptable. "You're not going to lose us," she said, softly. "But you will push us away if you continue trying to put us in a glass bubble. I don't know how to do it differently. Every time I relax my vigilance, something bad happens." Emily approached him, taking his hands in hers. "Nathan, what happened to Isabella wasn't your fault. What Victoria did wasn't your fault. And you can't spend the rest of your life trying to control every variable to avoid tragedies." And if something happens to you, to the baby, then we'll deal with it together, as partners, as a couple. Emily squeezed his hands. But I can't live in a golden prison, even if it's made of love. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and Emily saw the internal struggle in his eyes, the businessman who was used to commanding fighting against the husband who was learning to trust. I don't know how to stop worrying, he admitted finally. You don't need to stop. You just need to let me be your partner in the worry. They talked late into the night, establishing boundaries and agreements about how to share responsibilities. Emily agreed to be more careful with her health, and Nathan agreed to include her in all important decisions. It was a start. Lily's birthday party was a success, held in the garden of the mansion in Aspen. Emily had insisted on helping with all the details, and the result was a celebration that reflected the girl's cheerful personality. Lily was radiant in her pink dress, surrounded by some children from school and the property staff who adored her. It was during the party that Emily noticed something that worried her. Lily was playing with the other children when one of them asked about her biological mother. The girl was quiet for a moment, then said something that made Emily stop in the middle of what she was doing. My first mommy went away the night the bad woman came, Lily said casually. She was crying in the bedroom when I woke up. Emily approached discreetly, her heart racing. Lily had never mentioned specific memories of the night Isabella died. What bad woman? Asked one of the children. The woman who worked with Daddy. She yelled at Mommy and then Mommy fell. Emily felt her blood freeze. Lily had witnessed more than anyone imagined. She had seen Victoria and Isabella arguing, possibly had witnessed the murder. She moved away from the children and went to look for Nathan, who was talking with some neighbors about business. When she told him what she had heard, he turned pale. We need to talk to her, he said, but carefully. If she really saw, she may be traumatized without us knowing. They waited until the party ended and the guests left. Lily was exhausted and happy, surrounded by presents and still wearing the princess dress she had insisted on wearing. Little one, Emily said, sitting next to her on the couch. Do you remember your first mommy? Lily nodded. I remember. She had beautiful hair and smelled good. Do you remember the night she went to heaven? The girl's expression changed, becoming more serious. I remember. I woke up because there was noise. Nathan sat on the other side of her, taking her small hand. What kind of noise, princess? Loud voices. Mommy was crying and the office woman was angry. Lily looked between Emily and Nathan, as if realizing it was an important conversation. They were on the balcony. I left my room to see. Emily and Nathan exchanged a tense look. What did you see, love? The woman pushed Mommy. Mommy screamed, and then she wasn't making noise anymore. Lily tilted her head. Why did the woman do that? Nathan picked up his daughter in his arms, hugging her against his chest. Emily saw tears in his eyes, the pain of discovering that his daughter had carried this trauma alone for 2 years. Some people do bad things when they're very angry, he explained carefully. But it wasn't Mommy's fault, and it wasn't your fault. Is the bad woman in jail now? She is, forever. She can never hurt anyone again. Lily nodded, seeming satisfied with the explanation. Is that why you and Emily are sad sometimes? Because of my first mommy? The question hit Emily hard. Lily had noticed more than they imagined about the impact that Isabella's death still had on their lives. Sometimes we're sad, Emily admitted, but we're happy too. Happy to have you, happy to be a family. And when the baby is born, we'll be an even bigger family, Nathan added. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Emily and Nathan stayed awake, talking about the day's revelations. She saw Victoria kill Isabella, Nathan said, his voice loaded with pain. My 2-year-old daughter saw her mother being murdered and never said anything. She was too young to understand what she had witnessed, Emily said, caressing his arm, and maybe part of her blocked the memory until now. We need professional help, therapy, child psychologist, something, Emily agreed. It was time to ensure that Lily had all the necessary support to process the trauma she had carried alone for so long. Nathan, she said after a moment, do you think this changes anything? The fact that she saw? What do you mean? For the investigation, for the case against Victoria. Nathan considered the question. Victoria has already been convicted, and I don't think it's good for Lily to have to testify or relive all this officially. Emily agreed. The child had already gone through enough trauma. The next day, Nathan cancelled all meetings and spent the entire day with Lily, playing, talking, doing simple activities they had missed during his years of absence. Emily observed the two from the couch, one hand on the stomach where her baby was growing, feeling a mixture of joy and melancholy. Joy to see Nathan finally allowing himself to be just a father, without the pressures of work and responsibilities. Melancholy to think of all that Isabella had lost, all the moments she would never have with her daughter. Emily, Lily called her from where she was putting together a puzzle with her father. Can the baby play with us when it's born? It will take a while, Emily replied, smiling. Newborn babies just sleep and nurse at first. But after? After, yes. I'll teach him to put together puzzles, Lily declared seriously, and not to be afraid of the dark. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Lily's capacity to love unconditionally, even after everything she had been through, was impressive. That afternoon, while Lily was taking a nap, Emily received an unexpected call. Miss Emily? This is Barbara Morgan. Emily needed a moment to process the name. Barbara Morgan was Nathan's mother, who had moved to Europe after Isabella's death and had not returned even when her son was arrested. Mrs. Morgan, Emily said, trying to keep her voice neutral. What a surprise. I heard you're pregnant. Congratulations. Thank you. I'd like to talk to you in person. I'm arriving in the United States tomorrow. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. The mother-in-law she had never met, who hadn't approved of the marriage, who didn't maintain contact with her own son, suddenly wanted a conversation. Of course, she said, because there was no other socially acceptable answer. Great. We'll meet for lunch. I'll send the address. And she hung up before Emily could respond. When Nathan got home that night, Emily told him about the call. His reaction was immediate and negative. No, you're not going to meet with her. Nathan, you don't know my mother, Emily. She's complicated, manipulative. She won't bring anything good to our life. She's your mother and grandmother to Lily and our baby. She's a woman who abandoned her own granddaughter when she most needed family. The bitterness in Nathan's voice was palpable. Who didn't appear when Isabella died, who didn't come when I was arrested, who showed no interest in Lily for 2 years. Emily understood his anger, but also felt curiosity about the woman who had raised the man she loved. Maybe she wants a second chance, she suggested. Or maybe she heard about my financial situation and wants to make sure she doesn't lose her inheritance. There's only one way to find out. Nathan sighed, recognizing the determination in her tone. If you go, I'm going with you. She invited me alone. Then don't go. Emily approached him, touching his face. Trust me. I can handle her, whatever her intention. And if she really wants to be part of the family, Lily deserves to have her grandmother in her life. And if she says horrible things about you, about us, then I'll know who she really is and you can cut her off from our lives completely with my blessing. Reluctantly, Nathan agreed, but Emily could see he was worried. And this time it wasn't the excessive worry he had been showing. It was genuine apprehension about what his mother might do to disturb the peace they had built. The next morning, Emily dressed carefully for lunch, choosing an elegant dress that subtly disguised her still early pregnancy. She didn't know what to expect from Barbara Morgan, but wanted to make the best possible first impression. The restaurant was one of the most expensive in New York City, the type of place where New York society went to be seen. Barbara was already waiting at a reserved table, an elegant woman in her 60s, with perfectly styled hair and posture that radiated authority. She stood up when Emily approached, evaluating her from head to toe, with eyes that reminded her very much of Nathan's. Emily, she said, extending her hand, you're prettier in person. Mrs. Morgan, thank you for inviting me. They sat down, and Barbara ordered wine for herself and water for Emily. "I suppose you don't drink in your condition?" "No." "Sensible." Barbara studied her for a moment. "I must admit I was surprised when I heard about the marriage. Nathan never showed interest in simple women." Emily felt the insult, but kept a serene expression. Simplicity can be attractive. Indeed it can, especially after the complexity. That was Isabella. The mention of Nathan's first wife caught Emily off guard. "Did you know her well?" "I did. Traditional family, European education, all the attributes a mother expects for her daughter-in-law." Barbara took a sip of wine. But she was also unstable, dramatic, too demanding. Emily didn't know how to respond. Speaking ill of a dead person seemed wrong, especially Lily's mother. "I imagine Nathan was traumatized by the experience," Barbara continued, "hence the choice for someone so different this time." "If you're trying to insult me, you can be more direct," Emily said calmly. "It will save time for both of us." Barbara smiled, and for the first time seemed genuinely amused. "I like you. You have backbone." "Thank you, I think." "Emily, I'll be direct. I didn't approve of your marriage because it happened during a crisis. It seemed opportunistic on your part, and desperate on his." Emily felt her face heat up, but maintained her composure. "And now?" "Now I see that you survived the first few months, that Nathan seems genuinely happy, and that Lily is flourishing." Barbara leaned forward. "And frankly, after the tragedy with Isabella, anything that brings stability to my son's life is welcome." "Then why did you never visit Lily? Why didn't you come when Nathan was arrested?" Barbara hesitated for the first time during the conversation. "Because I'm a coward," she admitted. "Because seeing Lily reminds me of Isabella, reminds me of how I failed to protect her, and because I couldn't accept that my son might be guilty of the things he was accused." The raw honesty of the answer surprised Emily. "But now you can. Now I know he's innocent, and now I see he's found someone who fights for him instead of simply benefiting from him." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each processing the conversation. Emily was beginning to understand Barbara Morgan, a woman who loved her son but didn't know how to show it, who carried guilt for the choices she had made. "I would like to meet my grandson or granddaughter when they're born," Barbara said finally. "And Lily?" "I'd like to meet my granddaughter too again." Emily nodded. "That will have to be Nathan's decision." "I understand, but I hope you can positively influence him on the idea." "I can speak for him." "But Barbara," Emily deliberately used her first name, "if you do anything that hurts Lily or destabilizes our family, you'll never be welcome in our lives again." Barbara smiled again. "I definitely like you." When Emily got home, she found Nathan in the office, clearly anxious, waiting for news of the lunch. "How was it?" he asked before she even took off her coat. "Interesting." Emily sat in the armchair in front of his desk. "Your mother is intense." "That's an understatement. She wants to be part of our life, of Lily's and the baby's life." Nathan sighed. "And you believe her?" "I think she regrets having stayed away, and I think she deserves a chance to be the grandmother that Lily never had." "Emily, you don't know her history." "Then tell me." Emily leaned forward. "Tell me why you're so afraid of letting your mother get close to the family." Nathan ran his hand through his hair, the familiar gesture when he was uncomfortable. "She was always controlling. When I was growing up, she wanted to decide where I would study, who I would marry, what career I would pursue. When I chose Isabella against her will, she went years without speaking to me. And when Isabella died, she said I had brought it on myself by marrying an unstable woman." The hurt in his voice was deep. "She said Lily would be better off in a boarding school in Europe, away from all the mess of our life." Emily better understood his resistance. Barbara had abandoned the family when they most needed support. "But people can change," she said softly. And Lily deserves to have all the possible family around her. And if she tries to interfere in our life, try to influence our decisions about the children, then we'll put her in her place. Emily took his hand. Together, as partners. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. You really believe it's worth trying? I believe it's worth giving a chance, a supervised chance with clear boundaries. Reluctantly, Nathan agreed to meet with his mother. The meeting was scheduled for the following weekend at the mansion in Aspen, familiar territory where he felt more comfortable. When Barbara arrived, Lily was playing in the garden, not knowing she was about to meet her paternal grandmother. Emily watched from the window as Nathan and his mother talked on the porch, their body language tense but not hostile. Then, Barbara saw Lily. The transformation was immediate and impressive. The older woman's face lit up, and Emily saw tears in her eyes as she observed her granddaughter running among the flowers. She's just like Nathan at that age, Barbara murmured when Emily joined them on the porch. Do you want to meet her? Emily asked. Barbara nodded, clearly emotional. Emily called Lily, who ran to her with cheeks pink from playing. Little one, there's someone who would like to meet you, Emily said. This is Barbara, Daddy's mommy. Lily looked at the older woman with curiosity. Are you my grandma? I am, Barbara replied, her voice choked. And you're even more beautiful than in the photos. To everyone's surprise, Lily approached and extended her hand. Nice to meet you, Grandma. Barbara. The simple, polite gesture from the child broke any residual tension. Barbara took the small hand offered and smiled through tears. The pleasure is all mine, dear. The rest of the afternoon went surprisingly well. Barbara proved to be an attentive and interested grandmother, asking questions about Lily's school, her favorite toys, her dreams. She didn't try to take control of the situation or criticize their parenting choices. When it was time for her to leave, Lily hugged her spontaneously. Can you come back to play with me? She asked. If your parents allow, Barbara replied, looking at Nathan and Emily. You can, Nathan said after a pause. Regularly, if you want. That night, after Lily fell asleep and Barbara returned to New York City, Emily and Nathan talked about the day in bed. It was better than I expected, he admitted. She really seemed interested in Lily as a person, not just as an heir. People can surprise us, Emily said, snuggling against him. Sometimes they just need a second chance. Like you gave me a second chance, Nathan murmured, kissing the top of her head. Like you gave me a first chance, she corrected. They lay in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined over Emily's stomach where the baby was growing. For the first time in months, Emily felt they had found a real balance between protection and independence, between past and future, between the family they had lost and the family they were building. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, compromises to be found, traumas to be processed. But it was real and it was theirs, and it was worth every moment of uncertainty they had faced to get there. The next morning, Emily woke up with a strange sensation in her stomach. It wasn't the usual morning sickness, but something different. More intense. When she got up to go to the bathroom, she saw blood on her underwear. The panic was immediate and devastating. She called for Nathan, who came running from the closet, still in a towel after his shower. What is it? He asked, but stopped when he saw the expression on her face. I'm bleeding, she said, her voice coming out in a terrified whisper. What happened next was a blur of frantic activity. Nathan called the obstetrician who met them at the hospital. Tests, ultrasounds, medical questions that Emily could barely process as she clung to Nathan's hand as if it were a lifeline. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the doctor smiled. The baby is fine, she said. Just a small implantation, bleeding, completely normal in some cases. Strong heartbeat, appropriate development for gestational age. Emily collapsed in tears of relief, and Nathan embraced her as if she might disappear at any moment. You'll need more rest, the doctor continued. Less stress, more care with physical activity, but there's no reason for excessive concern. When they left the hospital, Emily felt emotionally exhausted. The scare had been a brutal reminder of how fragile happiness could be, how quickly everything could change. I never want to go through that again, she said to Nathan in the car. Neither do I. He kissed her hand. But we got through it together and the baby is fine. He is. And we're going to be fine too. Emily nodded, but she knew the scare had changed something in them. It had reminded Nathan of all his fears about losing.